Welcome to this special live edition of PR Done and Dunner. If you are new to the podcast, we focus on many areas that are relevant to tech, PR, and marketing. And we are thrilled to have on a third-time guest, Robin Schaffer. Robin, welcome to this special live stream.
Is this the third time already? I can't even believe that, but I'm very happy, Bob, because you're a guy I always love talking to. Really
Thank
fun.
you. Well, I'm wondering if it's like Saturday Night Live, where fifth-time guests get a special velvet smoking jacket, and you can look forward to the fifth time.
What color smoking jacket?
I believe it's red with gold embroidery. Are those your colors?
Ooh, that sounds good. I'm in.
All right. So, well, you're the first one to repeat 3 times. Well, hopefully we'll have you back many more times. But anyway, we are here to discuss an important topic that is, I think sometimes we can agree, sometimes misunderstood. Robin will help make things clear. It's about industry analyst relations. And some of you, I'm sure, know Robin. She's well known in AR circles. Robin is an expert in the space. She's an author. She's done research. She has a successful growing practice. Of course, at Fusion PR, we do analyst relations as well. But we wanted to ask the audience for questions, try to explain the latest that's happening in the field, and just have a nice dialogue. How does that sound, Robin?
That sounds perfect. Perfect.
Excellent. So, I mean, I guess I'd like to hear from you in terms of what's happening in the field today as we look forward to, the rest of the year. Just bring us up to date with what's been happening with industry analyst relations, challenges, opportunities, that kind of thing, before we launch into the Q&A.
Oh, well, you can't look at any field these days without talking about AI. So AI is the hot topic, and everyone is exploring both how does AI affect analysts and the analyst function that they've always done, which is advising buyers, advising vendors. How does it all change with the advent of AI? It changes the way analysts do research. It changes the inquiry volume because people have tons of questions about it. So the analysts are busier than ever. It changes the amount of research they can produce. So analysts are starting to produce more. And it kind of also changes how buyers get their information about everything today, right? So you go to ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude, and you put in a question about your environment and your need for technology, and you get an answer about that formally would only be from an analyst. Now, how accurate it is, how informed it is, how valuable that is very questionable, but is something that the analyst community is looking at and understanding how it would affect them. Most analyst firms are adapting. They're using AI to build new ways to utilize and access their intelligence, their research, their knowledge. They're building interfaces. As I said, they're using AI in the research process and in the evaluation process so they can be more productive. So it's affecting it like it is in every walk of life. For analyst relations, which is the people like me who sit between the vendors or work for vendors or sit between the vendors and the analysts and build those relationships, there's a lot of questions because, first of all, how does the potential changes in the analyst world, so if analysts change the way they work or what they produce or what they value they deliver, how does that change what AR people do? And there's really good questions going on about what is the heart of AR and what will we continue to do no matter what happens? And that's an interesting question. So a lot going on, a lot of questions, a lot of debates, a lot of interesting thoughts.
That's great. And would you say, has AI been ultimately a threat to the whole analyst industry analyst space or analyst relations, or has there been
I
much
think
change?
I think some people see it as a threat. Some people are worried about it. Some people are wondering about it. I'm very curious. I think everybody knows that you can't go into ChatGPT or one of its brethren and get an answer to a technology dilemma, the kind of thing you would bring to an analyst and have the confidence and have the knowledge. So, but will it be there? It may be there at some point, to give you answers and to give you insights that you need. So there's that question. But the bigger question is, how does it impact the whole analyst ecosystem? And some analysts are, changing what they deliver and how they deliver it to be more effective using AI.
Yeah, I guess in summary, it sounds very much like the PR field. Everybody's loading themselves up with AI, whether you're a journalist, whether you're a PR person, figuring out how to use it for benefit rather than seriously threatening either area.
If you're not talking about AI these days, I don't know what you're talking about. Are you just sitting alone? There's no other conversation that's happening in the world, as far as I see, that has that kind of focus and attention. And like I said, in all fields.
Well, I would imagine if the analysts are doing a good job, they are tracking the growth of AI as well. That's a very important research sector for them.
And that is driving enormous use of analysts right now, because everybody's trying to figure it out in enterprises. Vendors are trying to figure it out. Enterprises are trying to figure it out. Everybody is going to analysts to get expertise on it. It's definitely the topic. Now, what's interesting, I started to talk about what AI can do and what it can be a threat for. But what most people talk about is that analysts predict the future. They look at what's coming and what's likely to happen, and look at and extrapolate into the future. And AI can't do that. Analysts also have a lot of private information, private data that's not accessible to the LLMs, their research, their insight notes. They have rich conversations with enterprises and vendors, and that's all inaccessible to the LLMs.
Good point. By the way, if you are joining us live, welcome. Again, we have Robin Schaffer as a guest of Schaffer AR. Say hello in the comments. Tell us where you're tuning in from. And please share any questions there. And we'll try to get to all of them. Right now, we have a list of questions that was provided to us in advance. Let me start with a very basic one. When is the right time to begin an analyst relations program for a company?
Oh, that's such a great question. I work a lot with startups and scale-ups. So this question comes up every day, practically, with people wondering, is it too soon? When is the right time? I will say that you mentioned that I'm involved in research. I would do a research project with my partner, Chris Holscher, and the University of Edinburgh. And we look at the state of startups and industry analysts, and we ask a lot of questions. So we have a lot of interesting findings about what value people find at what stage. And the one thing we learned from analysts is they want to hear from innovative startups as soon as possible. If you have an idea that's going to disrupt the market, the analysts want to know about it, and they want you to share with them your ideas. So an analyst briefing, which is where you explain to an analyst and you educate them on what you're doing, why you're doing it, who you serve, how you serve them, what value you deliver, is free, right? So it should be free. If it's not free, that's not really an analyst. So the analyst will grant you time to talk to them based on the relevancy and the value of your message, of your information. If it's relevant to their research and their coverage, they will want to talk to you, because an analyst needs to represent and understand the entire ecosystem. They need to understand the big players. They need to understand the the ones that are coming up and the new ideas. And they know that new ideas and innovation comes primarily from the startup market. That's where it's happening. So they're very, very interested in startups. So what we found in the research is that analysts are much more interested in startups than startups believe. So startups don't think they're going to be interesting to analysts until they've got a hardened product and lots of customers, and they're getting big and they're scaling, and that's not true. So when to begin really depends on what you're positioning, what you're selling, what you're doing. If you're Me Too, the analysts don't want to hear about you. If you don't have anything that's really interesting and different, then you can wait. If you're selling into the SMB, primarily the small medium business market, it's not as critical, because if you're trying to get into the enterprise, so you may be a startup trying to get into the enterprise, it is critical, because the enterprise doesn't make decisions, especially on unknown startups, without consulting analysts. They want that validation that your offering is good, that your company is solid, that you have that validation. So you need to start building those relationships immediately if you hope and aspire to sell into the enterprise.
So from what I'm hearing you saying, and maybe this will help us counter one of the biggest myths I think that is out there, is that they're coin operated, you just have to pay. But what you're saying is you don't necessarily have to pay. They want to track who is doing interesting work in the areas they cover, correct?
Yeah. I will say there are coin operated analysts. That is true.
There are some.
They are a minority of the market out there, because most people know that they lose their credibility if they're coin operated. If a firm like Gartner or Forrester or IDC or any of the other big firms were to be impacted, influenced, biased by your investment, they would immediately lose their credibility with buyers, because that would get out and that would taint anything they say or anything they recommend. So they protect their neutrality fiercely, because they want to provide that. There are small people who say they're analysts who will write things for you, or you could pay them money, they'll write wonderful papers and blogs about you, and that's about that's worth about as much as the pixels that it's drawn on. So the analysts that have reputation aren't coin operated. It just doesn't work that way. Now, if you're one of the biggest companies in the world and you're spending millions and millions and millions of dollars with an analyst firm versus a startup that's doing it for free, are they going to get a different consideration? They will probably. It might affect that somewhat, but it's really a minority of what happens.
Excellent points. And I see a question coming in from LinkedIn. Hi, Robin. Thank you for the gold insight you share. As an AR lead in a mid-sized company, how do you go after, I hope I have this right, FIG, vendor evaluation?
Forrester, IDC, and Gartner. That's what FIG stands for.
How do you go after these evaluations as well with other reports like vendor landscape reports and market guides? Any tips? How do you best truck out a plan? Which ones do you I'll ask you, throw in a question there. Which ones do you decide to spend time on? Because they could be very time intensive and resource intensive to fill these things out.
Very time intensive. Although AI comes into that also, and I'll get into that in a minute, about how people are using AI solutions to help on the vendor side responding to these things. So it's an interesting situation that's going on now in the world. But back to the core question is, how do you decide and how do you get in? So you need to understand evaluation criteria. So you need to understand what the analyst is looking for. If you're only in North America or only in Europe and they're looking for global representation, you're not going to get into that report. If they're looking for a certain threshold of revenue and you're not near that, you're not going to get into that report. Now, of course, things evolve, right? Usually the big FIGs are hardest to get into. and they represent usually the big global players because their customers are the big global enterprises, right? So they're harder to get into. Some of the smaller firms, like I'll mention Everest and ISG, those are two in the services field that I've just been working with a lot, cover more vendors in their evaluations, and it's much easier to get included in those reports. And getting included in those reports gives your company an opportunity to kind of learn how to respond to these things and get an opportunity to be featured in analyst research while you're building the relationship with the Gartners and the Forresters. Now, the interesting thing is Gartner and Forrester in particular takes inquiry from buyers, right? So the authors of the Magic Quadrant, so there's a Magic Quadrant in 200 or so of them, different spaces. The authors of each one get a lot of inquiry from buyers looking to help them understand. So the quadrant is, mapping the vendors, evaluating the vendors, and they're trying to understand it in their context, in their world. How can you help me? And in those conversations, they're also asking, who else should I look at? Who else should I consider? So who else that's not on this quadrant should I be looking at? And that's the perfect way for an analyst to mention, bring up a vendor and introduce a vendor to a buyer. So, this hot startup, I've been following them. They have a really interesting solution. They have a great strategy. And I think you should give them a look-see. So this is a great opportunity for especially people trying to get into the market and get their brand awareness.
So what is the first step for a company that is kind of new to analyst relations? I'm assuming it's fairly easy to do a search and see which reports are important that you get into. But I mean, what is the first step? Do they have to brief the analyst first to get information? Do they talk to the account team, say, I'm interested in this report, I think we fit in this report, how do I proceed? Or what's the best way? What are the steps?
Usually, so going back to what I was saying, if you truly have an innovative, disruptive solution, the analysts are going to want to talk to you. So briefing is as much as offering to them and explaining what value you're going to deliver. Briefings are free. Briefings are the first thing you should do when they start to build the relationship. So every company should be identifying, as you said, through search and through there's other tools, the right analysts for them, prioritizing the most influential analysts and starting the relationship as early as possible, starting with briefings. And then one of the things we found in not this research, but some other research was that when you ask startups or scale-ups, looking back, what's the one thing they would have done earlier? They said they would have started doing inquiry. So inquiry is where you ask an analyst some questions about competitors, feedback on your messaging, information for your roadmap, market, GTM, all of those questions that you have when you're running a business. You have the opportunity in inquiry to talk to analysts about it. And they're usually extremely, extremely valuable conversations, but they're not free, right?
So maybe we change.
They come with a commercial relationship, right? Because they're not going to sit on the phone with you and give you all that knowledge and that feedback without your being a client. So this is where it gets a little tricky and people might see it as somewhat coin operated, but it's really not. It's just their business model, right? But also when you do free briefings, if you're really clever about it, you do get a lot of indirect feedback.
Yeah, in my experience, they want to show how smart they are, the analysts, and they usually don't hold back. They're usually a little bit outspoken, at least the ones we've dealt with.
Yes. The bigger firms are not as much, but I find when you get beyond the top firms, beyond the top two firms, when you get beyond like Forrester and Gartner, analysts are very free with their feedback and input. And I've found that consistently in firm after firm. They want to show they're smart. They want to deliver value. They want to be your valued partner. And you get a lot of feedback through briefing them.
Excellent. Maybe this is as good a time as any to talk about the quote flavors of analysts. I'm seeing a question in response to a question from Leonard G. He's being told that there are analysts and also advisors. What's the difference? Maybe you could break down just, the taxonomy. What kind of analysts are out there and what's the differences?
Yeah, so within analysts, there are different flavors. There are analysts that support buyers primarily. So they're supporting the companies that have questions, and they're giving that insight to the buyers. That's the minority of them. Most analyst firms, not analysts, but firms, are more supporting vendors. They're really helping vendors be more successful. The big ones that support buyers also support the vendors, and those are super valuable. But in the analyst world, I kind of look at it as sales, marketing, or insights. Those are the three things that you're trying to get from AR. So sales, you're trying to get analysts to recommend you, like who else should I be looking at, and recommend you and talk about you and bring you up, write about you, mention you. That gives you opportunities for new sales opportunities. Marketing is how analysts have a megaphone, and they can help you get your messages out to the market. So some of them do white papers or webinars. These are paid engagements.
Sure.
Some of them will blog about you and write about you and include you in reports. Those are not paid engagements. So between those, you have analysts that are really, their primary value to you is helping you get your message and your brand out there. Then sales and marketing are kind of, they overlap, they're kind of similar, but insights is really different. And insights is where you're looking at analysts for what they can teach you, what you can learn from them through different kinds of engagements where you're really going in deep with an analyst about helping you with your strategic and even tactical operations that you're doing.
And are there analysts that focus on specific industry sectors? You also mentioned enterprise. Are there analysts that focus on advising SMB clients?
There are some. That is not a big market, but industry-wise, there definitely are analyst firms that specifically focus on an industry. An analyst basically has expertise, and their expertise is either technology domain, and that's most of them. They understand cybersecurity, or they understand CRM or something. That's their domain. Or they understand the industry. So like KLAS research is in healthcare, right? So they will understand all the parts of healthcare and how different technologies impact healthcare and what healthcare is doing. And then there are analysts that focus on a geography. So maybe they're in the Nordics, right? So they understand the trends that are going on across all technologies, across all industries, but they're looking at it through the lens of that region. And that's a minority also. So there's those three types. Now, I think what Leonard was also alluding to was advisors. So right. Advisors are a different flavor. They're somewhat similar to analysts, but they're very big in the services market. If you're a professional services firm, there are advisors that get more engaged in helping customers or buyers make a service provider decision. So they're like consultants that can actually bring you business because they have that kind of a model. So it's different than analysts, but you have to treat them similarly. They have to know you, they have to understand you, you have to have a relationship with them. So usually in services firms, there's a different person that handles the advisor. Sometimes it's the same person.
Interesting. What about VCs? As part of their due diligence, when they're looking at different spaces or investments, do you think they consult with analysts or buy the research?
They absolutely do. They absolutely do. And some firms have specific offers for like VCs, mergers and acquisitions, where the investors will buy a subscription for that specific advice. Like 451 has that, Gartner has that, and many other firms have that. So they will either formally or informally, access the analyst knowledge, because investors know numbers, they know business, they know general technology trends, but they don't know the technology and they don't know the vendors in depth. So a investor will go to the analyst world to understand and to vet an investment, to vet a direction, to vet the space they're investing in and learn about it.
Great. And I see a question from the audience. In case of an M&A, how do you prioritize AR in strategy, especially where the impact of AR is yet to be realized apart from the vendor evaluations?
That's a really good question. And I have to admit, I don't have a lot of experience with this specific thing, with the mergers and acquisitions. I have firms that have been the acquirer and firms that have been acquired. I think AR. I think there's a lot of questions. I think analysts can be very important in helping companies understand potential partners or potential acquirers, because they understand the ecosystem. So they have a play in kind of matchmaking. So when a company is looking to exit or looking to acquire, the analyst community can be a great source of information. The analysts also, when you have relationships with analysts, they're going to want to understand and know your plans, right? So under, an NDA kind of non-disclosure situation, you can talk about what your intentions are, and they can give you advice and feedback on that. In terms of getting coverage for the M&A, the analysts definitely have a play there. They will talk about any significant acquisitions in the tech market and give coverage for that topic. So I'm not sure if that answers that question.
We'll let them know. They'll let us know by comments if it didn't, but they mentioned in their comment also about vendor evaluations. I guess, is that a good way to prioritize your work with analysts to understand not only the analysts, but which evaluations are recognized?
Oh yeah, you were asking that. Well, let me answer one question about evaluations. I definitely have I've had several clients who have a long-term exit plan, a 3 to 5 year exit plan, and getting on an analyst evaluation is part of what they're trying to do, because they want to increase their valuation, and they want to show the market that they are a significant player. So I have firms that they have a specific objective to get on one of these reports.
Right. Understood. Yeah. So, it seems to me that's something that's important to look at and maybe even factor into your decision in terms of who to actually hire, the ones that maybe have the important reports. I think most of us have heard of the Gartner Magic Quadrants, the Forrester Waves.
That's what you're aiming for. I was saying before a little bit about how you want to go to maybe the secondary firm might be more interesting to you as to start to get into evaluations and to kind of build your muscles for participating in those evaluations. So this is going to take longer time to get onto the big ones, but you need to develop that relationship with those authors early, way before you're ready to actually get on the report, because 2 reasons. Because they need to start to learn about you. Actually, multiple reasons. They need to start to learn about you. They can actually give you advice to help you get to those thresholds. And I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. So getting on
the Magic Quadrants, the Waves.
Yeah. Oh, and the other thing that I lost my train of thought was that the analysts, as I said, are in conversations with buyers all the time, the analysts of those Waves and Magic Quadrants, asking about opportunities and other vendors. And if they don't know you, you're not getting mentioned. And if you have a relationship and you've proven to them your value to the market, they will talk about you. So, and that will, all of that will culminate in getting onto those reports eventually. Maybe take 2, 3, 4 years, but you'll get there. You'll have a long strategy.
There's a long question here. I'm going to put it on the screen because it's too long for me to scroll here. Let's see. About moving to a retainer or piecemeal model where funds can be used for a range of engagements, not just an upfront seat concept. I'm not sure if I understand this question. Do you, Robin?
Yeah, this is a really big question. We were talking about how AI is affecting things, and one of the things is are the analyst models, their business models, going to change? Because of AI, but because of the forces, the forces in the market, and I think that they're all. One of my colleagues, Carter Lusher, who's a real expert in analyst relations, has said that he sees kind of a barbell where the big firms will prevail. They will figure this out. They will come up with models that work, and they will prevail. The smaller firms will the good ones will get clever and will understand, like he mentioned some of them right here. They have different models and they have different ways of delivering value, and they will remain and be strong. So it's like like a barbell, and then the middle is questionable whether these firms will succeed.
I guess we'll see. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the model where funds can be used for a range of engagements, not just upfront seat. I think it's a very popular model with the smaller vendors that I work with. It's really interesting because they can get the value in the ways that are specific to them and not be, based on a seat.
All right. So talking about investment, and this ties up with the question I see now, to help justify continued investment in AR, which specific metrics should we be tracking that clearly show the impact on revenue, market perception, and competitive positioning? And by the way, this ties in with the larger question I think of, is ROI a good lens to view your work with analysts?
I think ROI has to be part of everything. I think, it's hard to measure, but you need to be thinking that way. So what we do with our clients to address this question is we start with like 3 to 5 business objectives, nothing to do with analyst relations, but you need to grow revenue. You need to expand into a geography. You need to release a new product. You need to build your partner network. What are the specific things that you need to do in the next 12 to 18 months? How will AR support that? So you have to position with the right analyst. You might work with an analyst to build you some content or do an event, some demand generation. You might get insights from an analyst to help you make sure that that product that that version that you're putting out there is going to hit the market. You might talk to an analyst about your messaging to make sure you're talking to the needs of the market. So we look at what's the AR strategy to drive those objectives? Who are going to drive the growth objectives? Who are influencing sales? Who are going to drive the brand awareness objectives? Who are going to drive the partner objectives? And then we build a strategy for that. And then we build specific AR tactics. And then we build how we're going to measure it. So a lot of the measurement is very difficult. We would all love to know specifically how the AR is impacting revenue. Everybody wants to know that. I want to know that. You want to know that. It's very difficult to measure. But it's not difficult to get leading indicators. So we measure the strength of the relationship in various ways, right? Because the more you engage with an analyst and the better you do at engaging with them, in a very positive, compelling way, the more they're going to think about you, the more they're going to mention you, the more they're going to write about you. So we track we track things like coverage, like share of voice, like you do in PR. We look at the share of voice among your competitors, among the analysts, like who's writing about whom.
Right.
So that's like a leading indicator. It's not a value that you could put dollars and cents on yet, but it's really getting you to the point where that analyst, again, is mentioning you and giving you sales opportunities and advocating for you. So we measure that. We always try, and we can do it. We have different success with different companies, but the ideal is when you get incoming leads, you have a way, it's strategically simple, have a way to identify whether an analyst was involved in that opportunity, in that incoming lead, and then test that the analyst was involved somehow in the opportunity. That's what we all want. That can be measured. It can be difficult to measure, but I think looking at how analysts impact that is really important. Some people, it's like every client that I deal with has a different way they're looking at getting value from analysts. And they have a different business model and they have a different opportunities. So for some, it's I want to get on a Magic Quadrant, or I want to get on a 5 reports next year or something, because they have an exit strategy and they want that, or they just want that for marketing and they just want that for brand awareness. So those are the kinds of things that we break down to understand what, there's also a huge value in trying to understand the impact of insights. If an analyst gives you a suggestion, gives you an idea, gives you a new direction, a new market to go after, something different for your roadmap, that can be extremely valuable. That can change the course of your business, avoid going down blind alleys, like all kinds of great things can come from that. The situation I find is that most companies don't act on the analyst's insights. So they get like this liquid gold from analysts, either through briefings or they have an inquiry relationship, and the analyst is giving them feedback on how they can improve in the market. And they nod their head and they intend to follow that. And most companies, I find in my career, are unable to execute on that because they're dealing with, focused on hitting their next milestones. And it's just the way of the world. Right. Some companies have like listening centers where they really have an innovation center where they have a way to take in that input. But in most companies, it's very difficult for people to take action on these insights. So we really work with our clients. Number one, ask the right questions, because unsolicited advice is not that helpful. But if you have a decision to make, you're trying to accomplish something, and you ask an analyst for their advice, that's likely to get acted upon. So the value of those is pretty impossible to measure. What's the value of changing your messaging, or improving your messaging, or going after a new segment or something? It's very difficult to measure that. But intuitively, if the company is doing that and an analyst was part of either suggesting it or validating it, it's an important part of the business model.
Joellen wants to know, how can you tell if an analyst was involved in a deal?
The analyst will not tell you. So they will not tell you they're involved in the deal unless they are one of those advisors types. And some analysts are a little bit more open with that, but the big ones won't tell you. And you really need to try to understand it from the customer perspective. You have to have a relationship with your customers, just like when you go in a sales situation and you find out, you map out the internal organization, who are the decision makers, who are impacting, and you kind of go through that process. You have to understand external influences too. So a good salesperson, a good seller, will investigate if the client is working with an analyst and find out more about that, and then leverage that information to sell. But it's not, there's no magic way to do it, because the analysts generally won't tell you.
Got it. Well, we know it can be hard to measure, just like PR, and some of it's very long term. Like in PR, we have brand building. I mean, how do you measure the contribution of each article to that? But I guess you have to show something. Clients want to see some results. So, two questions. First of all, sales leads. Some may think that leads may reasonably result from your work with analysts and getting in the reports. And it's more of a short-term metric. Is that fair to look at that? And secondly, more generally, how do your customers ask you to provide reports, in terms of progress or?
We do. We start, I kind of mentioned the building the plan based on their business objectives, AR strategy, AR tactics, measures, and we give them 100 measures, I don't know, 25 measures, and we say, what's practical to measure? But we give them things that we could look at and measure. So sales is definitely one of the more difficult ones, but you know intuitively that it happens, right? Because if you talk to an analyst, I once talked to an analyst and said, how many conversations do you have where you're talking about vendors in our space? They said 5 a day. So 5 conversations a day with buyers, 25 a week.
Wow,
where an analyst can be mentioning you, talking about you, advocating for you, or not. You don't have the positioning with them. That's impacting sales positively or negatively. It's very difficult to measure, but we know it's happening. So some of the times we go to the analysts and ask about their influence on the market, and specifically the volume of impact they have.
Okay, by the way, for just joining us, this is the PR Dun and Dunner podcast coming to you live. We have a guest, Robin Schaffer of Schaffer AR. She's an industry analyst relations guru to answer your questions. One person asked about your book, and will there be another book or an update too?
That's such a good question. It's funny because I've talked about it a lot or thought about it a lot, and I feel like it's really hard to do something right now because everything's in transition. That's what I feel like. We don't know a lot of the answers to what's going to happen. It might be an interesting short-term book, with people's predictions and, how the market's going to change. But I think we need a little more time for things to settle in before we can make some conclusions and write a useful book. But thank you for that question.
What is the right amount of budget? First of all, we talked about we started the fact that analysts will take free briefings. And we talked about the kind of company, when are you ready? But I guess a follow-up question is, when should a company expect to start paying actually? Which stage? Is that different than an earlier stage company? And how much?
Yeah, it's I've talked to more than one startup that I've talked down from the ledge of investing big money in an analyst firm too early. And they think that they mistakenly believe it's coin operated. So they believe, well, if I want to get coverage, I need to pay this firm to get coverage from them. And it doesn't work that way. So I'm always, counseling them that we don't want to start off by investing with an analyst yet. We want to brief them and start developing relationships and start understanding who has value, who gets it, who do you want to work with, who has value, and really amass the knowledge and the relationships of these analysts, and look at the question of investment in terms of ROI. What value can you get from investing with this analyst? It may be hard to measure, but I think you have to ask yourself hard questions about what value you're going to get from them. I find most companies can get very far as startups without making investments. At one point, you're going to hit a wall, okay? Because if you're only building your analyst relations program based on briefings, you have 2 problems with that. You can't do them very often because they won't grant you the opportunity to brief them frequently. And they're one way. So you're just presenting to them, and you're getting some feedback, some like feedback, but you're not really getting their knowledge in. That kind of two-way conversation not only gives you the knowledge, but it really builds those relationships really well, because analysts love being in that role, helping you, being your trusted advisor, helping you think of, I always say that briefing is like sitting with an analyst on the opposite side of a table. You're talking, they're listening. Inquiry is you're sitting at the same side of the table, rolling up your sleeves and working together to solve your problem. And that changes the nature of the relationship pretty deeply. So you're going to want to start getting that kind of relationship, which does take a commercial investment. And it can vary wildly. So it depends a lot on your space. It depends a lot on your stage. I don't think there's not a one size fits all answer, but I think early companies should do as little as possible spending, and let the analyst earn your dollar by helping you specifically with your problems and your needs, and do it in a step-by-step wise kind of process.
I mean, can you start with a smaller budget and invest in projects or, one-off collaboration versus?
Yeah, that was kind of what I think that's what somebody was alluding to, that the different firms where, some of the firms have a seat model. You invest in a seat, your rights to read research and ask inquiry. And then if you want to do additional advisory or additional work with them, it's more of an investment. Some firms have that kind of flexible model where you can invest in like units. You can invest in this company in a certain number of units, and you can use those units for them to write a thought leadership paper with you, to do some collaborative research, to appear on a webinar, to give you advisory. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can use that investment. But that's a great model for a startup to start working with analysts and start getting that experience. So besides briefings and inquiries, how can we increase our visibility and gain mind share? Excellent question. I think we have to start with the goal of building advocacy. So people talk about building relationship. Having another friend is not really what you're trying to do. You're trying to get them to be advocates. You're trying to get them to be supporters and want to see you succeed. So obviously briefings and inquiries are the heart of it. Longer advisory sessions are super, super valuable. And that's a period of time talking to an analyst, chewing on specific problems and opportunities. They can do SWOT analysis. So longer sessions are an excellent way to build rapport, because what you want to have happen is not you want to get beyond formal briefings from them or to them as quickly as you can. You want to have conversation. That's where the real value is, and that's where the relationship happens. Showing them customer examples, introducing them to customers is very powerful. So we've had situations where you might invite an analyst to a customer advisory board or a user conference so they can engage with your customers, because that's where they're going to really learn about you. So those are some of the top things I think you can do.
Am I back, Robin? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Good. By the way, if we run into problems again, just look at the chat, the private chat, and we'll hopefully get that sorted out. But I heard you, and it seemed like a good answer. I think, as we both know, another very interesting way to leverage work with analysts, especially when you're paying them, is to somehow involve them in your PR activities, whether you're getting quotes for a press release or providing them as a reference to a reporter.
Totally.
Right?
That's super powerful. And that's one of the first things we do with clients is look at your PR, look what you're doing from a PR perspective. What's your strategy? How do we involve analysts in that strategy? Maybe it's as simple as how do we align messaging so that the messages you're looking to get out in the market from PR perspective are aligned with what you're telling analysts. And most of the time they're not. There's not a simple alignment, so you're singing from the same song sheet. Then when you have a press release, you have a new announcement, you have a new product, you have a new acquisition or something. Really great process is to take one of these analysts that you have a good relationship with at advocacy, give them an NDA briefing on what's coming, and let them absorb it, let them give you feedback to maybe tweak how you get the message out, what that PR says, and also give you a quote. Be a reference for the journalist, because now they're understanding what you're doing. So it takes you building the relationship and then investing time to educate the analysts ahead of the press release on what you're doing, getting their feedback, and getting quotes and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, especially we've seen if you have a customer name, but you don't want them to be public yet, you do ask the analyst if you can brief them under NDA. I guess a question we've run into from time to time is, do you need an actual legal agreement to NDA, or is it more of a handshake? Please don't share this in advance kind of thing?
It's a good question. I'm not sure I'm an expert on that, but I'll tell you my experience. Basically, when you have a commercial relationship with an analyst, you have the things are under NDA. But I always tell a client, if there's specific information that you specifically don't want them to disclose, you mark slides NDA, and you make that distinction. So I don't trust, that NDA will hold. If you don't have a relationship you don't have a commercial relationship, you need to just ask, the handshake. Analysts are not out to scoop or, get into that story. So you're usually pretty safe with that, but you need to have a discussion, a direct discussion about what is shareable.
I guess this brings us into the details of the briefings. And well, one question we get from time to time is, do you need a deck? Should you have a deck for an analyst briefing?
I always have a deck. I always recommend a deck. A deck, is that what you said?
Yes, like a PowerPoint or some kind of
I just lost you again, but I think you said deck.
Correct.
So I just think people need that visual support, and people that present need that guidance that you get with a deck. So I always recommend a deck. There's a question about, is ISG good for industry focus? I don't know of ISG for industries. I know ISG is great for service providers. So they have two sides to their business. They do what do they call those? Provider lens, I think. It's a report. It's like a Magic Quadrant. Service providers, and they have every kind of service providers under the sun that they cover. They have reports for. They have another part of their business, which they acquired, a firm called Ventana, and they do buyer's guides for software solutions. But I don't know of them as being specific for industries. Those are such good questions. I think we addressed all of it. I will tell you a little thing that I did at the end of 2025, which I've done previous years. I did a predictions blog. So I've done like a tongue-in-cheek predictions blog, and I've done serious ones. And then I was going to do one for this year, which of course, as I started with, is just crazy year in every line of business. Or 2026, 2025, 2026, trying to predict is pretty impossible. So I was thinking about it. I was coming up with them, and I said, I got a better idea. I found 10 great AR people. Some were practitioners in companies, some were analysts, some were AR, some were other AR consultants, just a variety, and analysts too, a variety of points of view. And I asked them, whoops, I just dropped my my thing. Hold on. I want you to hear me. So I asked them each to I built a blog based on one prediction from each of these people. And it was such an interesting blog. And what I asked them each to do is give me three ideas for your prediction, and I'll pick one so that I can get it. I don't have everybody writing about the same thing. And it was really cool. I got it's on my LinkedIn. You can find it. I have it as a featured item on my LinkedIn, the AR blog with Albert Einstein, the AR predictions, because AR is moving at the speed of light. I will just say thank you to Bob. Bob is one of my go-to PR gurus that I know, knows how to do tech B2B PR like the back of his hand, and he's great. And I've enjoyed doing the Done and Doner podcast, and I hope I've answered your questions. Robin Schaffer, Robin at schafferar.com. Always happy to talk. I'm on LinkedIn. Let's talk about AR.
All right. I'm going to say goodbye. I'm not sure if anybody else can hear me. I guess that's the perils of live streams. But thank you, Robin. I'll let you know. And thank you, everybody. And we'll hopefully talk again soon.